Well, hello YouTube. I should be live. I'm still experimenting with my live streaming settings and trying to get things optimized for a positive viewing experience. So every time I do a live stream, I at least watch some of it later and notice all these things like, oh, the sound levels are not good, or something with my screen setup could be better, or whatever. So I'm trying to improve incrementally. And today, one of the things that I'm going to try to remember to do is to type on my Bluetooth keyboard here on my lap so that one does not hear the sound of me typing on the laptop, which I didn't realize comes across very loudly in the microphone and is, to my ears, a rather unpleasant sound. So apologies to anyone who's been watching my past live streams and has been seriously irritated by that sound. I'll try to type over here so you don't hear it. And speaking of typing, this like chapter idea that I was typing out live, like title cards, seemed to work pretty well. I'm probably going to keep doing that as a way of like organizing the live stream in real time and then making it easier for me to go back and add bookmarks or timestamps later. But I changed the text file to white instead of black, so it'll be easier to see as I'm scrubbing through the video. By the way, if you're a nerd for text programs like I am, I guess maybe a little bit, you should check out this application. It's called simpletext. I don't know if it's available for Windows, but I've been using it for a while and I quite like it. It's basically just a notepad app. If you're used to using like the built-in notepad apps, I mean like the old school like Notepad or WordPad, if you like those kinds of like ultra simple text editors, not for coding or anything, but I mean just for like writing, you know, prose or notes or whatever, then give simpletext a shot. I quite like it. The setting that I had before I changed it for the purpose of the live stream was I had it dark and what they call, oops, where'd it go? What they call, where is it? Oh, typewriter mode, which positions the cursor in the middle of the screen and then automatically advances the line. So I'll just type some gibberish text. So you see it automatically advances the line as if it's paper being like, what's this called? You know, rolled up in a typewriter. Kind of a neat effect. Might be confusing if you've never used a typewriter, but I'm also a typewriter nerd, and I love this because I'm used to seeing the text, you know, or the page advancing in this manner, you know, off of a typewriter scroll. So it's a fun little effect to me, but not super useful for the live stream. So I'm going to go back to regular mode with the text at the top, and we'll do light so it's easier to see as I scrub through. All right, and that's probably enough of a general preamble for the text stuff. I guess I should talk about the purpose of this composition session because it's different from my previous one. So let's make a note about that. Purpose of this composition session. Now that we're into talking about the actual music stuff. So the piece that I'll be working on in this live stream, or the pieces, is a set of hymn settings, what I call hymn settings. And there's a lot I could say about these. I'm not sure how to start. I guess first I'll say, if you were watching my previous live streams, you saw me working on a piece called Around a Center. And I spent a lot of time revising that piece and working on the ending and everything else. So let's actually say that catching up about Around a Center. Right. So where that piece stands now is I've thoroughly revised it since the last live stream. So there's a lot of work that I haven't shown on video yet. I did write a new ending, like another like extension of the ending. And if you watch previous live streams, you saw me working on that ending a lot. So I've added even more to it since then. right now I need to really sit on the piece for a while, because as it stands right now, it's very much a finished piece. And I could like call it finished, put my stamp on it. It's now finished, and I'm now not working on the piece. I'm not revising the piece or anything like that. Now my work with the piece is recording it, getting it put together like as a video, with like a scrolling score, or maybe doing a camera, like an overhead shot of my hands at the piano, something like that. So, that whole process I've learned from hard experience. You cannot be working on the piece at the same time as you're trying to record it and everything else. You just absolutely have to separate these processes. I don't know if that's a hard and fast rule for other artists or whatever, but it's a hard and fast rule for me, because I've just found in, again, bitter experience, that if you are trying to revise the piece at the same time, like concurrently with recording it, even if it's just you recording it, it's going to be an incredibly frustrating and unproductive process. And God help you if you're trying to make revisions while an ensemble, or while other people are actually working on the piece, either for performance or recording. If you're sending your ensemble like new drafts of the piece while they are rehearsing it, oh boy, that is bad, 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 bad. Right. So where the piece is right now, I'm calling it finished, like pending further reflection, because I'm still not quite sure how far I actually want to go with the piece. It could develop quite a bit further, where as it stands right now, it's a 10-page piece. I've seen all of these ways I could expand it substantially that would push it into a different order of magnitude as far as the scale and scope of the piece. Like, I think sections of the piece could be expanded by twice their length. Like, the first melody of the piece, the first theme, is basically something like 12 bars, and then there's a little interlude, and then the 12-bar theme comes back, and then other stuff happens and goes to other themes. I was thinking, the second iteration of that theme could actually go on quite a bit longer. It could take on a different kind of form and be substantially elaborated, in which case it wouldn't be like 12 bars anymore. It could easily become a whole section of 32 bars or whatever, some duration, like, an order of magnitude greater. And I realized that about the second theme as well, and certain transitional moments. I realized everything in this piece could probably be scaled up quite a bit. I could expand almost everything in the piece. And that's a real thing. That's not just speculation, because I have done this in the past with pieces that I've had pieces that started as a 5-page piece and ended up becoming like a 15-page piece, right? Like tripling in length over the course of revisions. It's not unusual for me to do this. And when it happens, you do have to basically rethink the entire piece from the inside out. It's not just that you're tacking on bars at the end of a theme. It's that all of the proportions change, right? If the proportion of one part of the piece changes, then everything else changes around it in this kind of chain reaction, because a single section of a piece doesn't exist in isolation from all the others. It's communicating, so to speak, with the others, and they all relate to each other in various ways. They have different proportions and stuff. So if you make like your first theme of the piece, 3 times as long, then you kind of have to change everything else in the piece, so that it correspondingly, proportionally, maintains similar relationships, unless you want to change those relationships. Like if you realize, I want my first theme to be this huge thing, and then everything else after is going to seem small in comparison. Like, I guess you could do that, and that would change the way the listener hears the piece dramatically based on those changed like dynamics or proportions. But if you want to scale up your first theme and keep it in proportion to everything else the way it was before, then you have to, of course, proportionally scale up everything else. So basically, what that means is like if I have a first theme, then I'm thinking about making, say, twice as long. Then I have to look at, my transitions, possibly make those twice as long. Same with the second theme, possibly make that twice as long. This is a huge oversimplification. Doesn't really work that way in practice, but I'm just giving an example of how you start looking at the entire rest of the piece, differently now. So, it's like I said in, I think the previous live stream, or I think it was composition session 4, whichever one is titled like significant revisions to this piece. I was looking at how do I kind of get more color into the piece? How do I go a little further? I use this whole Joker analogy and stuff. I kind of achieved that to some extent. I did kind of start playing with the material a little bit more. I got some fresh harmony in one section and maybe some more inventive texture or something like that. But as I was doing that, I was really trying to keep the piece within its original scale. I was really trying not to add too much material. And if you watch that live stream, I think you'll probably see me sort of agonizing over how to make these changes without expanding the material, without adding a lot more material. And I think I mostly achieved that because in the course of significant revisions, the piece went from only like 8 pages to 9 or 10 pages, which isn't a huge expansion. Like, yes, that means material was added, but it's still roughly in the same scale, right? It's what I would call like an 8 or 9 or 10 page piece. Like an 8 to 10 page piece, that's kind of one particular like category of length. It's very different once the piece gets to like 15 pages. There's a big difference between a 10 page piece and a 15 page piece, right? There's not a huge difference between an 8 page piece and a 10 page piece. But once you get into these bigger orders of magnitude, then those differences in duration, in felt duration, those differences get really noticeable over, like, obviously when the differences are greater, they're more noticeable. And so what I mean is that if you think of those durations as basic categories, as I've described in the past, like you've got your miniatures, right? Those are pieces like 1 to 2 pages long, miniatures, like the Etudes of Chopin. That's one kind of like, boom, one genre. Then you got a huge genre of pieces that are in the, say, 3 to 5 or 3 to 6 page length, right? That covers a wide range of music. The 3 to 6 page piece. I'm talking about solo piano pieces, by the way. This is different, of course, for other instruments and stuff. Then after that, I would argue like starting around 7 or 8 pages. Then you get into another kind of scale, and that's where you're looking at like a piece that's over 7 pages in length. If it's a single movement, it's like a big movement. It's a substantial piece. If it's like a fantasy or something like that, a chaconne or toccata or some like really like meaty piece, not even a chaconne, is a theme in variations or something like that. It would be a short sonata. A 10-page piece would be a short sonata. It would be almost like a sonatine, like the Ravel sonatine is like something like that, 10, 12 pages maybe, I think. But, the Beethoven so-called sonatinas, even though they're sonatas, the Opus 49 sonatas, for example, I want to say there's like maybe 10-page pieces. A Clementi sonata no, those are actually a lot shorter. Anyways, without getting into the weeds of it, a 8 to 10-page piece is like a more substantial piece. Then you get into the like true multi-movement, like large scale works after that. And then it kind of all is just, I would say, kind of fair game after that. Because after about, let's say roughly like 12 pages or so, once you get 13 pages and up, now you're looking at pieces that are like, these are just big pieces. These are like your symphonies for piano, basically, in a sense that these are like, they require real dedication and commitment from the performer. Not that the others don't, but I mean, like, this is where you're really taking on a big project. You're going to climb a mountain. Right, so my composition around a center is currently at, I want to say, 9 or 10 pages. I'm strongly considering moving it into another category in my mind of these durational categories or length categories. I'm strongly considering moving it into that next category of a fairly big piece. I don't think it would be too difficult for me to add another 5 pages of material to the piece to basically not quite, yeah, just about, not double its length, but just about make it 50% longer. So basically going from like whatever it is, 9 pages to say 14 or 15 pages, which would then make it like a big, pretty big piece. All right. So I have to think about that. I really got to sleep on that. That's a toughie. That's a toughie. But in the meanwhile, I thought I would come back to some pieces that I have left unfinished, that I've left in the, what would you call this? Left in the fridge? No, left on the back burner. I got it on the back burner, but I really haven't been tending to it, so I don't know if I can even say it was on the burner or I just put it in the drawer, the dreaded drawer of uncompleted projects that you're not really actually working on. So, talking about hem settings. I'm going to talk myself to death, so there's so much I can say about the reason for this project, what it is, what my goals are with it, and all this other stuff. But for now, I'm just going to play. Here is my setting of Be Thou My Vision. Just make sure my levels are right. I'm going to play through it. Whew. I have not played this piece in quite some time. I quite like it. You're allowed to say that about your own music. It's not arrogant. You're allowed to say you like your own music. You're supposed to. It would be troubling if you didn't, right? So, gosh, I really like this piece. Oof. That's a good feeling when you play one of your own pieces and you go, wow, this is nice. I wish I wrote this. Oh, wait, I did. Yay. Well, who cares? It's just nice to have a nice piece, right? Regardless of who wrote it, even if it's me. I'm just glad it's a nice piece. Well, I dare say it's a nice piece. Playing it through for the first time in, gosh, probably a number of months. I don't know how many months. I've worked on these pieces on and off for quite a few years now. So I guess that's first thing, jumping into like what these pieces mean to me. So I'll just say like backstory on these hymn settings. Probably get into this a little bit. Yeah, I will. Here's the whole backstory on these hymn settings. It gets into my own personal like career backstory too. I guess they're kind of inseparable. So I started working as a church musician, as a pianist, about how many years ago now? What was it? 2018 or 19? 6 or 7 years ago, which feels like a lifetime to me. I'm still pretty young, I guess, 33. So that it feels like a significant chunk of my life that I've now been doing this thing. And when I first started, I didn't really know what I was doing. I learned on the job. I started when I was in graduate school, music school. I guess I'll say, I don't know if I've ever said this on the live stream. So for whoever's watching, here's more of my like full credentials, I guess. So I have a bachelor's in music that I did 2010 to 2014. Then took 2 years off to work, and then 2 years off from school. Worked for 2 years. Then I went back to school. I went to graduate school at UCLA in 2016. Got a master's and a Ph.D. in music, mostly studies in composition. Though along the way, I've studied conducting and piano performance as well. So I guess that just about covers it. So while I was in graduate school, obviously at that point I had plenty of education, and that's probably why I got hired, because they saw, oh wow, you have a bachelor's and a master's in music, so you must know what you're doing, right? And not really, as it turns out, because nothing in my education, I didn't study church music, or even collaborative piano, really. I just was a guy who had a lot of lessons and performances as a pianist and composer. So playing in church was like pretty new and pretty scary. So one of my lifelines was contemporary compositions for church service. And that might sound really obvious, but at the time I wasn't even really aware that that was a thing that existed, because I had never had a reason to encounter that type of music before. So, like, I know this sounds horribly ignorant, but it just didn't occur to me that there were a lot of composers, contemporary living composers, writing vast amounts of music for use in church, for use in worship services. And of course, as a church musician, as a pianist, I quickly discovered that, and then I was kind of down the rabbit hole of discovering that whole genre of music. So I found some favorite composers and arrangers pretty quickly. I'll list a few now, and if you're not familiar with these people and you want to hear some very beautiful music, then please check them out. Before I get into the list, I'm going to just make sure my live stream stuff is going correctly. So I'm just going to say here, quick digression to check live stream settings. And I know for anyone watching this, seeing me do this on my phone is probably embarrassingly amateurish, but oh well. this is the way I'm going to do it until I get a fancier setup with like dual monitors and all that stuff and microphones. Okay, it looks like it's working. Once again, I am checking it on my phone. So if you're watching this and you're going, oh my gosh, he doesn't know what he's doing, I do apologize. Oh, one of the things I wanted to figure out was how to show the live chat on the live stream. I know other live streamers do this, and there's like a whole like thing where you have the chat like as part of the video, not just on the YouTube webpage, but it's like actually like embedded into the video. And I was looking into how to do that, and it seemed a little more complicated than I initially thought. So I was like, oh boy, I'm gonna maybe not do that right now. So I can't see the chat. I think I've missed some comments. I've seen in previous videos that people have actually commented like on the chat as I'm streaming, and I don't get to their comments because I'm not like actively checking them. So which is a shame. So I really have to figure out how to fix that, because otherwise I can't interact with people who might be watching. It says one watching now, which I guess is me. So I guess we won't worry about it too much. Yeah, that's another thing. Talking about the purpose of live streaming. Purpose of live streaming. Like, I know these videos are probably going to be maybe 50 views forever. It's hard to imagine my channel like blowing up someday. I don't think I'm ever going to be a famous YouTuber. Maybe with consistent effort, you know, I can grow my channel up to a certain point. But I don't imagine these videos will ever be very, I don't know, very watched. I mean, hey, one of my videos has now, at the time of this recording, like 60 views, which might not sound a lot to you here in YouTube land. But I grew up in a small town, and if 60 people came to your show in the high school auditorium or wherever, or at the farmer's market, if 60 people showed up to see you where I grew up, you were famous in that town, man. You were a rock star. That was a good feeling. So I don't care. I'm famous, at least by my standards. 60 views. That's a lot of people watching me ramble with no focus for hours at a time. I mean, I feel pretty good about that. Anyways, all right, so back to the hymns. Talking about, let's just say contemporary worship music. Talking about contemporary worship music. So the composers that I came to admire for not just the beauty of their music, but also the craft. The big one is Mark Hayes. You know, Mark Hayes for me is like such a I don't know how to put this. I mean, he's a great composer in this world. I'm not familiar with his non-worship music. I know he's done plenty, I think. I'm familiar with his choir music, piano music, some miscellaneous stuff, but music specifically for use in worship services. And oh my gosh, it's like this guy can do just about anything. You know, he has really skillful piano music in just about every style and genre that you can think of. I mean, if you're not familiar with what it takes to be a skillful arranger, and that doesn't sound like much to you, you should know that, at least by my book, that is seriously impressive. Any of these great arrangers, and there's many whose names probably aren't nearly as well known as they should be, but you know, there are these arrangers that can do, you know, really convincing arrangements in like any style. And by that I mean anything from, you know, like bebop, jazz, to bossa nova, to, you know, neo-baroque, like contrapuntal, you know, common practice type writing. I mean, like, just this huge body. I mean, it takes a lifetime to master one style of music, really. Um, and so, if a composer has gotten to the point where they can do really convincing sort of facsimiles of any style or of many styles, I mean, to me, that is incredibly impressive, and a lot of arrangers can do it, like you wouldn't believe. Like, how do they know this stuff? And I actually had a lesson with Mr. Hayes, and I've been very hesitant about sharing my teacher's wisdom and attributing it to them by name. I in all of my past live streams, I say I had a teacher who said this, and I never say which teacher it was because I'm very hesitant about like ascribing words that I'm saying to another person, because then if that person ever watched or heard that I said, they might say, well, that's not really what I meant or whatever. So maybe I want to say that, oh, this particular teacher said this thing, but I'm also terrified of like somehow misrepresenting what they said or whatever. So that's a big disclaimer to this anecdote I'll share about something Mark Hayes told me, which is just that this is my recollection of it, but I think this is a very kind of safe thing to say. Anyways, I asked him, how do you get such idiomatic expressions of all these different styles? I mean, it's not just that it sounds convincing, it's also that it feels good to play, like it's idiomatic for the player at the keyboard, right? It's not awkward or kind of like you feel like you're getting bumped around a lot, like trying to grab all these chords or whatever. Like he makes it really comfortable and easy to play. And if you just play like what he's written, you don't have to add anything to it. You don't have to add your own embellishments or whatever. He's written all that stuff out for you. So if you're a good enough, reader of sheet music and you can just play stuff, then you can play through this stuff, and like people hearing it will just think like, wow, this guy is like, this guy can do bebop versions of hymns. Like, are you kidding me? Like, this pianist is crazy. And I tell people all the time when they say, oh my God, like your ragtime version of I'll Fly Away was incredible. I say, it's not my version. It's Mark Hayes' version. And it's printed in the bulletin too. It's always attributed, the name of the arrangement or whatever, and then, arranged by Mark Hayes, which oftentimes I think even the word arranged by is a little bit unfair. I really want it to just say by, because it's so original. I mean, think about taking a hymn tune and turning it into an elaborate ragtime sort of fantasy. Is that really an arrangement at that point? That's just a composition, right? I mean, how much of that composition comes from something that's already been written? Basically, just the melody and some of the harmony, right? But it's like that's an original composition. But I think most of the time, Mark Hayes and these other composers and arrangers, they are usually listed as arranger on the score. So I just follow whatever it says on the score, and that's what gets printed in the bulletin. So then a parishioner looking at it should see, I'll Fly Away, arranged by Mark Hayes, and I check the bulletins, that's what's there. So they should know that I'm not the one making up this music, but they're always like, wow, it's amazing you can play like a ragtime version of a hymn. And I'm like, I'm playing what Mark Hayes wrote. Like, I'm, I guess, and they'll say, well, you're bringing the right energy to it and you got the right spirit for it. And I'm like, okay, I'll take that. That's fair. Anyways, so I asked Mark Hayes, how do you get such convincing and idiomatic expressions of such a wide variety of styles? Like, where do you start to learn those styles to be able to do that? Like, what's your approach into those styles? I'm guessing, like, obviously a lot of listening and maybe some transcribing, and he said, this is so obvious when you when you hear it. He said, well, you have to play the music a lot, right? Like, you as a pianist, you have to play those styles, like, you ideally with a band and in a live setting. Like, it's not like you're learning it like from a book. I mean, books, don't get me wrong, the books are great, like they're very helpful. Like, you definitely, like, I have tons of books on jazz, how to learn jazz textbooks, jazz resources. I love these books like Jazz Keyboard Harmony and stuff like that. Here's one right here. Jazz Keyboard Harmony, super useful book. The Jazz Piano book and stuff like that. Like, yeah, you need to do this stuff. Of course, that's serious study, right? But, and here we get into this huge can of worms of study versus practice and all blah, blah, blah. But, like, to really learn the style, I think just about anyone would agree, you have to play the music. And you have to play it with other people, and for other people. Um, and that's how you start to really internalize it and really understand it kind of from the inside out. So when he said that, I was like, oh, of course. Like, duh, right? But even so, you need to hear it, because if you start writing a hymn setting, let's say you've got a brilliant idea that, oh, I'm going to do a bossa nova version of A Mighty Fortress Is Our God. There you go. That's a fun challenge. Take a Lutheran hymn and bossa nova, Antonio Carlos Jobim. There you go. That's your mashup. Make it work. Like, I don't care if you think that's sacrilegious, or actually, no, that's a whole nother discussion. Irreverence and everything, that's not to be hand waved away. But just thinking from a musical standpoint, could you make that work? You can probably make anything work if you have enough creativity and enough willingness to try things, I guess. So let's say you have that brilliant idea, but you've never played bossa nova before. And by the way, this is not such a hypothetical example for me, because I love bossa nova. I love, love, love bossa nova. I'm going to talk about bossa nova more in future videos. But I'm trying to stay focused on the church church hymn music. Anyways, but just for the purpose of this example, this thought experiment, you're going to write a bossa nova version of A Mighty Fortress Is Our God. And you've never played bossa nova before, like, where do you start learning to really play bossa nova so that you can write it, convincingly, if not authentically? You listen, of course. You get a book, right? Better, even than the book, is to start playing along with recordings, right? I mean, maybe once you've got your chops and your technique and your theory figured out, right, then you can play along with some recordings. And then, this is the dreaded part for me, you gotta go to some jam sessions, or you gotta jam with your buddies, or you gotta go sit in, at a club or whatever, like whatever you have to do, you gotta play that music with other people. And ideally in a somewhat medium stakes, medium to high, not super, okay, low stakes, yes, to get your feet wet, but there has to be some stakes, right? I mean, it's good, yeah, play with your buddy who's, you're just your friend and you're going to jam for a bit. That's a good way to get your feet wet. Then you should also go further and play in like a live setting. I mean, okay, you can take this with a grain of salt, coming from a person who doesn't play bossa nova for actual dance. But I would imagine that playing bossa nova, like really the spirit of the music, would be that you really ought to play it for people who are in some kind of social atmosphere. I'll put it that way. People who are dancing or drinking or, at a club, basically. I mean, don't get me wrong, this is not a highbrow, lowbrow thing. I mean, bossa nova absolutely belongs in Carnegie Hall and at La Scala. Like, I'm not going to, it's not about that. I just mean that, like, the spirit of the music and what it's really about and how it originated and everything else is, like, I think if you really want to understand that music, it's not just that you're playing it with other people, but you're playing it for other people, for maybe a certain kind of atmosphere, right? Like at a club or some kind of like really laid back spot where there's people like socializing and stuff like that. Well, anyways, I don't know. Anyone who knows about bossa nova really, really well can chime in for how I don't know what I'm talking about. But so that, I would argue, I'm really extrapolating and fantasizing on the initial idea of you have to play the music. I'm trying to take it to the furthest kind of place. But it does come back to this church setting. There's actually a point that I'm trying to make here, which is that if you write these, or I'll speak for myself, like when I was writing these church settings for myself, as sort of interesting compositions, they didn't really make a lot of sense. They didn't really make a lot of sense as actual practical worship pieces, because I was playing in a church where I was playing other composers' music, and I never played my own music, except maybe some improvisation or whatever. But I did not play my own compositions at all in my church job. I didn't have any music that I thought was appropriate for the church that I had written. So I never played my own music. Even when I started writing these hymn settings, I still didn't play them in church because I just didn't feel ready or whatever. I was just like, they're not quite there yet or whatever. I think I might have played one or two, and I just felt like, maybe, I'm not sure if this is working. Let me just stick with what I know works, right? So I kept writing these hymn settings that were really like thorny. Maybe they were very harmonically kind of. Let me see if I can find an example. They were not really good church worship pieces. Hymn settings. I'll try to show an example. And where is it? Oh, hymn arrangements. All right, you're getting to see my messy file structure. Archive. Not that. This is probably a nightmare for anyone who's really into file management, seeing all of my disorganized stuff here. Hymn arrangements, where? Sorry, I have an old version that I want to show. Backups, hymn arrangement in progress, hymn arrangements rough finish. Ugh, I don't even know. Original, more complex versions of pieces. Maybe this is it. Let's try it. I have one setting that's like in 5/8 that I'm going to use as an example of what is not an effective hymn setting for actual worship use. I don't know if it's in this collection. Is it Showers of Blessing? Oh, that was originally 5/8, and I changed it to 6/8 on one of my versions. Well, here, I can show the original version of Be Thou My Vision. Now that you've heard the setting that I stuck with, and I called it Lord of My Heart, which is a line from or a lyric from the hymn. But anyways, so here's how this hymn originally started, okay? Maybe you'll see what I mean. I'm considering this as a not super effective piece for worship and for the pianist because it's just a little too complex, it's a little too thorny with this rhythmic stuff. So you listen, and I guess you can be the judge. Get the idea. I mean, obviously you see me struggling here to play it. That's kind of the point. The fact that I'm struggling so much to just make sense of this rhythm. Like, it's a cool idea. It's a cool, like, 3 meters at once thing going on. Basically is what it is. It's like a Stravinsky thing, right? Like the left hand is basically like a duple. This is basically like it's in 2/4. You could also notate these as duplets with a little 2 in a bracket and no dot. So this is like the left hand is as if it's in 2/4. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and so on. The right hand has the 6/8 with the inner repeating note. And then the melody is really like it's in 3/4. Da, 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 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I mean, so that's probably obvious to everyone, but I thought I'd point it out. That's what's animating this section rhythmically. And like it's really cool when it comes together, and if you spend just a moment practicing it, I think it's not horribly difficult. But then doing that smoothly in tempo it is a little tricky. Starting to throw me a little bit here. Yeah, I mean, it's cool, don't get me wrong. But here we have to talk about the target audience. And I'm not just talking about the listeners in the service, I'm also talking about the pianists who will play it. It's a big thing I've kind of come back to over and over as I was working on Around a Center and previous live streams. You can hear some of my thoughts on this. Writing for a specific pianist, or not just a specific individual, I mean a specific kind of pianist, sort of an ideal version, or an ideal abstract version of like a typical type of pianist. And this is a tricky subject. It's the market demographic, basically, right? That's going to actually buy the score, theoretically, if this gets published. Or whatever, the pianists who will be interested in playing, even if it's not a professionally published score, you know, people, whatever, if I make contact with other pianists and they go, oh, I really want to play this, can you send it to me, whatever. So that's still like a demographic of pianists. And it's not just a matter of technical ability of that demographic. We could talk about that, you know, we could talk about like varying levels of technical ability among different like kinds of pianists. That's probably a big can of worms. But I think it's more about expected like preparation time and expected amount of practice time. So what I mean by that is like if you are writing a piano piece based on a commission from like a performing arts organization, you might actually have this specified in your contract, how much rehearsal time. I mean, depending on like the nature of the commission, this may actually be explicitly specified in the contract how much rehearsal time your piece is going to get. In my experience, oftentimes these things proceed sort of more along verbal agreements and understandings and stuff like that. But you know, if you're writing for an ensemble, it's reasonable to assume that they will have a certain fairly substantial amount of rehearsal time to work on the piece. Now, I know probably if you're a composer watching this, you're thinking, oh God, no, that's not always the case. Sometimes they look at the piece for, you know, half an hour before the concert or whatever. I know these things are all over the place, but I'm just talking about if you're writing like a chamber music piece for a major chamber music ensemble on a commission and stuff, it's probably safe to assume that you can write pretty involved music that requires a lot of practice and rehearsal time, because you're likely, you know, in good faith to have them actually doing that work. Now, this isn't going to be that church musicians don't practice enough or whatever. I'm not getting into anything like that. What I am saying is that church musicians, like a church pianist, is likely playing a substantial amount of music every single week. And it's different music. Like in my experience as a church musician, I have to play, not have to, but I play at least, I'm trying to think of how much time I'm actually playing during a typical service. Depending on the nature of the service, it can be about half the service, basically, is combined playing time for me. So it's safe to say easily 20 minutes on the low end, probably more like 25 to 30 minutes of new music that I have not played before every single week. Well, if I factor in the hymns that we repeat and stuff like that, maybe that brings it down to 20, 25-ish. But in any case, I'm playing a substantial amount of new music. And by new music, I mean like not music that was specifically written freshly for this service, but I just mean I'm learning about 20 to 25 minutes of music to play, at the piano every single week for, an audience, or the parishioners, the congregation. So that necessarily, just by the fact that time is limited throughout the week, that necessarily does limit the amount of practice time you can spend on any given piece throughout the week. It's not the same as playing a Beethoven sonata in 3 months, where you can practice it, 5 hours a day for 3 months. Like, you have 1 week and you have however many pieces, 10 pieces or something, that you're going to play throughout the service. So you do have to divvy up your time. And naturally, things are going to get squeezed for time. So without going into the weeds too much further, it's safe to say that your prelude, which this piece is intended to be, it would be a prelude or postlude. It could also be used as service music during like offertory or something like that. But this is a short solo piece that the pianist can use at some point during the service. Let's just call it the prelude. So this prelude, the pianist very possibly just may not have time to practice it for more than, I don't know, let's say 2 hours through the whole week or something like that. My point is not a lot of time to learn the piece. It has to be basically sight readable. That's my benchmark for writing a church service piano piece. It should basically be sight readable by a pianist of intermediate ability. That's a pretty stiff, parameter. That's a pretty solid ceiling of difficulty. If you think it has to be it has to be sight readable by an intermediate pianist, you're gonna really limit what you do as far as technical challenges, which I think is a good thing. I think it was Stravinsky who said, I'm the most free when I have the most limitations, or something like that. So this is a pretty hard limitation. Not hard as in difficult, but it's a pretty it's one that I'm committed to. Right. So this page is not within that. This is not really sight readable. It will really throw most pianists on the first time with all these rhythms and the fingering issues and stuff with the right hand. That's not to say an intermediate pianist couldn't learn this and play it really well. I think this is solidly an intermediate difficulty. I'm not saying it's out of the reach of an intermediate pianist at all. I'm saying if someone were sight reading this, they would probably have to stop and go, wait a second, at least for a little bit, right? And that, I think that can make the difference between them wanting to play the piece and not playing it at all. Is that moment of pause and hesitation. Oh, I'm going to have to figure this out a little bit. Is this really what I want to do for prelude this week? No, let me do something you get the idea, right? I know I've been in that situation. I've passed up plenty of very nice pieces that I'm looking at as a potential prelude just because I'm like, I don't think I'm going to have time to really learn that effectively this week, within a week, Right. And also you can have pieces that you're planning well in advance and all that other stuff. Don't get me wrong. I do that too. It's like, I'm going to play this piece in 5 weeks. I'm going to do it as the prelude for whatever service. And I'm going to take those 5 weeks to actually learn it. But you do have to plan those things. And maybe professional pianists who are much more savvy at the church music game, that's probably what they do, I'm guessing, is, they're planning, multiple, scaling out weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks in advance so they can do their big repertoire, in 2 months or whatever when it's actually ready. Okay. Maybe I'm not there yet, but maybe I'll get there. Who knows? So where I'm at right now with my hymn arrangements is I have some that I think are mostly ready. And the ones that I think are mostly ready are ready because they are technically limited intentionally to be sight readable and to be very, very like approachable for your average church pianist, that they would look at the score and go, oh yeah, I can do this, no problem, and then want to do it. As I played through this piece for the first time in months, I see all these things where I'm like, oh, it's still too tricky, it's still too intricate. I need to pare it down again. I need to simplify it yet again. This one that I just played doesn't have a lot of moments like that, because this one I've already worked on a lot. I've pared down this piece a lot. It used to be a lot more complex and have a lot more stuff going on with the texture and stuff, and I've already simplified it like substantially. Like this section, for example, originally the left hand for this had an octave in the bass, and the chords were 3-note chords like that, and they were going up. So the original left hand texture, I'll just do a quick. Oh no, it's not. Wait, why is it not taking my... Whoa, what the heck just happened? That was weird. Hold on. It's not taking my MIDI. Give me a second. Yeah, it's not doing MIDI input. What's going on? I'm going to have to probably relaunch Dorico. Sometimes Dorico decides to stop talking to the MIDI keyboard. And it seems like the only way to fix it is to just relaunch it. Anyways, so that section that you see right now where it was... well, hold on, let's go. Here it is. Yes. Gotta reinstall some fonts. All right, so this section was originally much more difficult to play. It had this. Something like that. Through this whole section. So these two bars that I just put in, that's not horrible. Like, any intermediate pianist can play that, but it takes a little bit of practice. You have an octave, you have 3-note chords, you have to jump around, your hand is like having to jump and grab these chord shapes. It's just an order of magnitude more complex than this, where the hand just stays within the octave, and you only get 2-note chords. Now the question is, can you really hear the difference? Well, of course you can hear the difference with the low octave, right? But let's say I don't do the low octave. Let's say I still have this version, right? Now I'm gonna play both and you'll hear the difference, or will you? Then the simplified version is this. Let's hear them back to back again. Complex version. With the octave, complex version. Right? And then the very simplified version I have here. So obviously there is a difference, right? And some people might prefer the more complex version. It sounds better. It's got more crunch. It's got more stuff. It's like bigger sound, all this stuff. That just sounds better. Perhaps. But I think the simplified version has a charm all its own. It's simple and not in a bad way. It's got a sort of guileless quality. So there's something about that I actually find very charming. I don't hear it as like missing or hollow or stripped out or anything. I actually hear it as just a beautiful thing in its own right. So it's not even really a question of better or worse. It's like, well, the simplified version, I actually get a result that I like just musically anyways. And the fact that it's a lot easier to play is a pretty good bonus. And I think my mouse just died. I'm going to plug this in. Wait, gotta write that down. Not really that important, but diversion to plugging in mouse. The reason I'm doing it right now is because if I don't, I will never remember to. If I say, oh, I'll remember to plug the mouse in after the live stream, nope, it'll never get plugged in. And then I'll never get charged. All right, so there we go. It's plugged in. Also, I gotta set my tea. It's cool. I let it cool down too much. And sipping tea. If you're curious about what tea I'm drinking, it's sleepy time. I love this tea. I've been drinking it forever. I'm not a tea snob by any stretch of the imagination. I couldn't tell you anything about tea. I know black tea, green tea, English breakfast, constant comment, sleepy time. That's about my knowledge of tea. So anyone who's watching this who's a huge tea nerd, I'm sorry if this is like, oh no, you can't drink that. That's one of the worst herbal blends on the market or whatever. Which is what I think it would be called, right? An herbal blend. Because it's just a bunch of different herbal teas blended together. Tea snobs probably take serious issue with this too. With the tea bag. It's like, that's not how you brew real tea. You have to do it in a proper, whatever, infuser. I had a tea infuser for, okay, so I was a tea, not snob, but not even nerd. I just got one of those little infusers and like would buy actual, tea leaves. Like I would go to like a shop like that sells just tea leaves and like pick out the tea leaves that I wanted and then put them in the infuser. And then, so I don't know if that makes me like a tea nerd or whatever, because it's not like I was researching like where they came from or whatever. I was just like, ooh, this looks cool. Ooh, it smells good. Okay, I'll get some of that. And I'll just like put it in a little infuser and like pour hot water over it, and boom, you got like some interesting tea. I haven't done that in a while. Now I just buy the boring prepackaged bags. Right, anyways. Where was I? So, simplifying this hymn arrangement. There wasn't a ton in this one because I already went through it so much with like a fine-tooth comb. But the big thing that jumped out at me was this arpeggio. Ooh, boy, I can't believe I missed this. This is really quite inconvenient. This is bad for all kinds of reasons. First of all, it's missing a note. But this is a perfect example of what not to do in a relatively straightforward hymn setting. To then have something like this come out of nowhere, come out of the blue, right at the end of the hymn, it will surely throw off a pianist, even a very, very good pianist, because, the piece has not done anything like this as far as a huge, like a really wide arpeggio. I mean, look how wide the span is. And then the left hand is also going over, which is the first time it's done this. I mean, it's just breaking a lot of rules of kind of good etiquette. So what can we do? Well, first of all, we need to see where it's coming from. Here's what precedes it. So we might want to look at that first. So even that, actually, this measure before is also pretty gnarly because the left hand is moving around down to this low chord. That's a little, ooh. And the right hand has to jump way down to get this chord. Oh, I don't know about this, folks. No, that's a little too hip. Even this measure is a little weird. Oh. Anyways, how do I get these chords simplified? All right, well, I'm going to work backwards because I know that I don't want the left hand going over. I don't want this really wide arpeggio. That's a little too much. We don't need the A. It's pretty, but we can get rid of it. And I want to keep the hand within an octave, so I'm going to get rid of this too. Let's see. Where are we at now? It's okay. Wait, I still need... Yeah, the thumb still needs to play a note. So, we're going to do this as a grace note. I do kind of like the grace note, but honestly, it's not really necessary here anyways. I'll just do it as a arpeggio, as a wavy arpeggio sign. That's just another sort of concession to keeping the notation simple. Keep it simple, right? The spelled out arpeggio with the grace notes, it's very pretty looking on the page, and it does create a certain musical effect, right? The player will probably play it a little broader than a wavy line, which they'll probably play, right, as a roll. But I don't want to be pedantic about the difference right now. I really want this to just look clean, I guess. Clear maybe would be better. I just want it to be really clear and not like something that throws a person off. So that's clearer. It's easier to play for sure. I can probably give the pianist the fingering here of the 5 threes. A little helpful to see. They don't really need the 5. That's very unnecessary. But the 3 is really helpful here because you have to shift hand position to get those. So 3. Yeah. There's a lot of wide chords here that pianists will find quite cumbersome to play. So I think I need to focus on getting rid of these wide chords. Like this one, as much as I love it, it's a beautiful sound. Ugh, it's gonna kill me to get rid of that. I could move the D up into the right hand, which is a 9th, which is better than the left hand having to play the 10th. By the way, yes, I can reach a 10th. Oh, it's a blessing, but also a curse. Okay, this is gonna be a whole subject, so I gotta write down. Talking about writing, composing piano music that feels comfortable to you, the pianist. It's a little wordy, but when you are a composer and a pianist and you write solo piano music, it's very, very difficult not to just write the music that is comfortable for you to play. In fact, almost all of the composers, the great composers, did exactly that. They wrote music that they liked to play. I know there are notable exceptions. The Schubert Wanderer Fantasy, right? Schubert, well, you can read about it. It's kind of funny what Schubert said about it. The devil can play it. Let the devil take it. Like he himself couldn't really play it that well or whatever. But that's the exception that proves the rule, right? Any of those cases, it's pretty unusual. Generally, pianist composers write music that they play, and by nature, it tends to be music that they like to play, that feels comfortable to them. And so, anytime we're looking at a pianist composer's piano music, we're not just learning about the music itself, but we're also learning about that composer as a pianist. We get to learn what that composer gravitated towards, like what they liked to play, and also we get to kind of feel the keyboard through their perspective, I guess. Through their body feels a little creepy. It's like a Cronenberg thing, but like we get to. I was also going to say we get to kind of put on their hands for a second, but that's also. All right. Well, the famous examples of this are like Rachmaninoff, right? Everyone knows the like meme at this point. Rachmaninoff had big hands, like so he wrote these big chords, right? And all this stuff. Which, as much as I love Agudizman and Zhu, I don't know if I'm saying their names right. I'm sorry, but the wonderful musical comedy duo, their whole thing with the Rachmaninoff C-sharp minor prelude, it drives me absolutely nuts because those chords are octaves, right? So I don't remember the whole piece, but hold on. I could get the score. Shoot. Oh God, this is so embarrassing. Right. Anyways, sorry, that's so embarrassing. If my channel ever does blow up, someone's gonna make a little clip of just that. That's the part that would become a meme. This is me hopelessly floundering, trying to remember the Rachmaninoff C-sharp minor prelude when I have the score right behind me. Okay. Anyways, I'm getting way sidetracked on this tangent, but let's follow it and see where it goes. This tangent. Right, the Agudismanenju thing about Rachmaninoff having huge hands and like using the C sharp minor prelude is so frustrating to me. Ooh, because these chords, they're all within an octave. Like that, anyone can play that. Any pianist can. Okay, maybe there are pianists out there who can't reach an octave. I guess that's a thing. I don't mean to. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if that's you. I don't mean to offend you. If you're a pianist who cannot reach an octave, I apologize. But most pianists can reach an octave. It's spans above an octave that pianists start to struggle with. I think most pianists can reach an octave. Like most pianists, I think, can reach a ninth. But many, myself included, by the way, struggle with certain ninths, right? Because they're not all created equal. So like a ninth from, say, E to F sharp can be a little more uncomfortable than two white keys or whatever. But if we look at real examples of Rachmaninoff's large chords, like chords that actually do have a ridiculously wide span, then yeah, we can see that Rachmaninoff liked ridiculously wide spread chords. My favorite example from a piece that I play, that I've performed a number of times, is the G sharp minor prelude, Opus 32, number 12, and he has some pretty humongous chords in this piece. And the way that he writes them, it's as if you're supposed to be able to play them all in one stretch. So even though he does give you the arpeggio line and everything, like here's an example. This chord, an unbelievably beautiful chord. I have to get into it, so I'll mute myself. Of course I messed it up, but it's this chord. One of the most beautiful moments in all of music. Oh my god. Okay, that chord. Left hand, 10th. Right hand, a 10th with a bunch of notes in between. There's like no way that anyone can reach that in one stretch. This is where I wish I had a better camera set up so I could show you the stretch, but my hand is like all the way stretched out and I can't reach it, and I can reach tenths. I haven't practiced that much, but that's white key tenths. Black keys are different though. So I should say I can reach white key tenths and some black keys. Well, if I stretch to it, yeah, I guess not. Not really. I can reach the black key to black key tenths, so minor, like that, and like that. I haven't tested myself for this very much. But then from a black key to a white key or a white key to a black key, I can't. I have to stretch. I can't reach that in one go. I'm sure there are pianists out there who can, and probably Rachmaninoff was one of them. Because this is B to D sharp in the right hand with other notes in between. And there are reports that Rachmaninoff supposedly could actually play chords like that without rolling. It boggles my mind, because if I try to stretch my hand over all four of those notes, I'm not even close to being able to reach all four of them without rolling. I have to roll my hand significantly to get across those four notes. And I've been told that, my span as a pianist is somewhat on the larger side. Like a good many pianists can't really reach tenths. A good many very, 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 very good pianists. They just physically, their hands are have a reduced spread or span, or length of fingers or whatever. So again, it's a blessing and a curse for me to be able to have a slightly larger hand span, It still doesn't really help me that much with Rachmaninoff, I don't think. At least I can't reach the chords he could reach. Maybe it helps me with some of the tenths, but whatever, I digress. When I'm writing my own music, I have to be really careful about that. This is the curse part of it. I have to be really careful about writing chords that are comfortable for me to play, but that might not necessarily be comfortable for most pianists. And this moment, where was it? This moment is a good example of that. So this chord in the left hand is pretty reasonable, I guess, because it's a fairly common chord. Like to have a major chord voiced this way, and especially on white keys, that is probably a familiar chord shape to most pianists. This is a very subtle difference, but this measure is different. Even though it's still a tenth, and it's on white keys, the fact that the middle note is a G, so it's a first inversion chord, that alone makes the stretch a little more awkward, because it takes a moment to calculate the hand shape in a way that this one doesn't as much, because it's such a common configuration. Now you could say that this is common too, but not nearly as much. You're not as likely to encounter this in like ragtime, for example, because ragtime music would typically be using this particular kind of voicing, first inversion, root position, not first inversion. Okay, so I'm looking for ways to reduce the spread of the left-hand chords in these three measures. It's kind of like you can do one, and that's kind of your big spread that the pianist has to, be ready for, whatever. But once you start doing multiple in a row, it starts to feel like uncomfortable, I think, for a lot of pianists pretty quickly. It's not super uncomfortable for me to do, but I think a good many pianists would find this to be just like, oh, I don't like that. I'm talking about this note to this note. So I do feel like I need to get rid of this big widespread chord, but how do I do that without losing my sonority? I want that tenth. I want that big chord, but I really don't want this to be awkward for the pianist, so I have to find a way to make a compromise here. Maybe the chord is the problem. I'm not sure if this D flat chord really works with the D natural in the soprano, because you still hear that D ringing. I mean, it's a cool chord. I love it. It's very hip and all that, but again, we have to think about our audience, right? This is a church worship service piece, right? That's a cool chord, but I don't think it's right for this piece. Let's bring it back a little bit. So maybe I don't want the D flat chord at all. Maybe I can just make it a dominant on G. No, not that. But we already had the G dominant in the previous measure. This is a good example of how one goal will start to snowball into other things. Like, if you recall, when I looked at this section in the first place, the real issue that I was trying to solve was this chord. So, where, there was this big roll and the left hand had to cross over. So I said, that won't do at all. I have to get rid of that. And that part was fairly simple. I turned it into this. Much more straightforward, easier to play. But then I was looking at how we get into that chord, right? Nothing exists in isolation. The pianist is going to play the chord before it, right? So you need to make sure that the transition is good too, right? So, and it's even more awkward now because the right hand in the previous measure has to jump down to this chord, and then they have to jump up to this. So the right hand is like jumping around like this. So I'm like, oh, I have to revise this chord as well, right? Like I have to make sure that these flow smoothly into each other, just from a technical standpoint, if not a voice leading standpoint. So as I started looking for a way to revise this chord, I realized, oh, maybe I don't really like the harmony. Like maybe it's not just the voicing, maybe it's the harmony itself that also needs to change. Because I realized, yeah, this chord's getting a little too funky. And so I started looking for a way to revise the harmony. And then I realized, wait, the reason it goes to a D flat is because we already have the G dominant in the prior bar. So I don't want to sustain this G harmony for 2 bars. Like I wanted a dominant leading into the C here, but I didn't want the dominant to be like a pedal for 2 bars. I wanted there to be one more intensifying chord, which I did here with this basically sort of tritone substitution, or I'm not sure what to call it. This is like a Scriabin technique. Like tritone sub, in my understanding from like the jazz world, is a straightforward substitution. Like you take what was originally a dominant, like a 2-5-1, and you do a tritone substitution of the 5, so it becomes 2 flat 2 1, right? So you've just moved the root a tritone away, and you get all these other like colorful note options and whatever. But Scriabin was playing with a similar idea in his music, but he would very frequently, he wouldn't really do tritone substitution. He would have the dominant just rotating around on the tritone. So he would have like a G dominant chord. He does this all over the place. I guess I should try to find a specific example to play, but it's like everywhere in his like especially middle late period music. Okay, wait, no, I have an example that shows this very clearly. It's one of his last pieces, if not his actual last piece. This might be the last thing he wrote, the 3 Etudes, Opus 65. Just an unbelievable set of pieces, especially the third one. So the Scriabin Etude Opus 65, number 3, I can't play it that well, but it opens like this. So this whole progression is this G, we're just going to call these extended altered dominants. So a G extended altered dominant that goes to a D flat, that goes to another G, another D flat, and so on. And then he just sequences that with other dominants, and so on. This is literally a tritone substitution where the substitution is actually occurring sequentially and repetitively. It's like you can hear these first 4 bars as a like a dominant to C, right? G, C, or D flat as the actual sub, right? But he does both. So he gives you the dominant and the tritone substitution of the dominant. But he never goes to the resolution. He just keeps pivoting. Okay, maybe then... No, he never resolves it. He just... and then just sequences it. Right, and so on. What was my point? Oh, so I'm borrowing that harmonic technique here. Yes, you can borrow from Scriabin in church music. We're borrowing from his harmony, not from his ideology. Which, if you don't know about Scriabin and mysticism and all the crazy crap that he believed, have fun. Go down the rabbit hole, learn about Scriabin and the occult and mysticism and all that stuff. So maybe he was a little cuckoo, but he had some pretty hip harmony ideas, and we can borrow those. So that's what I'm doing here. I have the G and the D flat before getting to the C. The problem is the melody note, is the hymn note, which really shouldn't be the problem because our whole point is to, respect the hymn tune. So we don't want to call the hymn note the problem. We've made the problem. The hymn is not the problem. And I do not believe in rewriting the hymn melody to fit your cool hip harmony. Other people might do it, but it's just not for me. I don't know. And I don't want to change my mind on that. That's one of those things I'm just really firmly committed to, that the hymn melody should be respected. Now, yes, there are creative ways to redefine the melody, and some of that might be rhythmic. Some of it might be that you actually are, it looks like chopping up the melody. And I say this because, my kind of model for these pieces is Mark Hayes, as I mentioned before. And Mark Hayes does this all the time. Like, he'll have the melody, he'll chop it up and have all these like amazing like rhythmic sort of reinterpretations of it, and he'll have funky notes and everything added in between. But the melody itself is always there and very recognizable. I think you get into trouble once you start changing like the basic shape of the melody and turning it into a different melody. Like, yes, okay, you could do like variations, you could do melodic variations and all that stuff. But I almost feel like then it should be labeled as such. Like you're doing a fantasy, for example, like a Thomas Tallis, Vaughan Williams thing, a fantasy on a melody. But if you say you're setting the melody, like you're taking the hymn tune and putting a setting of harmony and texture and stuff around it, then you really shouldn't change the melody, in my opinion. Aside from those, kind of clever ways of recasting it or whatever, but you shouldn't be altering its contour significantly, for example, or at all. And so here, it's very tempting to say, well, why don't I take the melody and make it fit with my harmony, which I could easily have it go down to a B flat or something. Or up to, up to the, sorry, this is much better. Have it go up to the E flat. Ooh, that really works. It's so tempting, right? Like, that solves my problem with the harmony. Shoot. Yeah, that's what we would do. So. Yeah, okay, one more time. So here it is with the altered melody note. I mean, it sounds really smooth, right? At least to my ears, you get this nice... Cool. I mean, that works. It's a nice little cadence or whatever you want to call it. But boy, I really don't want to change that melody note. I'm in a pickle. Oh, I don't like being in pickles. Rethink this whole measure, this chord. What was I thinking with it? Okay, so in my quest for a new harmony, I went back yet another measure. See, this is what I'm talking about. It's the snowball effect. It's the butterfly effect. You try to make one change and it ends up becoming 3 changes. And then, of course, that ends up becoming 7 changes. And it just keeps growing like that. So maybe this will be the last one. Maybe we're out of it. All right, so it goes to G dominant here. But what if it didn't? What if it actually went to a G major? And then we save the dominant for the next bar, and then we don't have to go to the D flat at all. We can actually keep it as a G dominant. Yeah, like this. Alright, so we're gonna get a little fancy here with realized I'm typing on the laptop keyboard again. I just realized. Sorry if you can hear my key clicks. I'm trying to be better at using my other keyboard. Oh, come on. Let me select just the slur. I'm trying to select this darn slur, and it's... Why does Dorico always have to select multiple things at once? Let me select one thing at a time, Dorico. Okay. Oops. Yeah. And then, look, the right hand can just stay on this chord for the whole measure. And everyone's happy. It's copacetic. We're going to change this whole thing to up stem voice 1. Oops. Don't type on the laptop. Change. Change. Voice 2. Up. Stem. Voice 1. Again, simplify the notation. We don't need two voices when they're all in the same rhythm. Oh, that was another thing I wanted to look at. So the left hand here, the way that the way it is jumping around, I guess, is not great. There's something really awkward about that. So this is a remnant of how this passage used to look. I used to have this as like an actual counter melody in the left hand that was happening on the quarter notes. So like if I were to change this right now, I could quickly whip up a version of what it looked like. So this would have been the down stem voice. Down stem. This would have been a down stem voice, and then the counter melody would have been the up stem voice. I'm just gonna play like some random nonsense just to give you an idea of it. It would have been something like this. Something like that. So obviously the right hand, or I'm sorry, I have to change this to match. So we get the shared note head. So something like this, right? So where the left hand had... Again, pretty cool, right? And does it work with the right hand? I don't know, because this is some random nonsense I played. Let's try it. Yeah, it kind of works, right? We've kind of got a little two-part, or what am I trying to say? Two-part counterpoint. So what's the word for this? This would be like species counterpoint or something. Yeah. Certainly with some modern harmony, but that's a little, that's very iffy from a common practice standpoint. Actually, it's just wrong, but we could do that maybe. No, I like my weird version. Now that I just did that random nonsense I played actually isn't so bad after all. I actually kind of like it. But the reason that I got rid of this in the first place was because I thought there's too much going on in the left hand. It should just be really simple and straightforward here. You know, so originally I had changed it to just a repeating octave like this. So we're left hand is literally just doing that, like the Pathétique Sonata. Nope. Oh my god, I learned this piece. I spent so much time on this piece now I can't remember it. Oh my god. Yeah, oh, that's it. It's been a while, folks, since I've tried to play the Pathétique. That was the second version. No, that's not. Sorry, this is embarrassing. Right, so it was gonna be just the octave in the left hand. That works, especially if you want a quicker tempo. Like if you really wanted to make this piece drive, that's a good way to make it drive, because the left hand doesn't have to do anything except the octave, so the pianist is free to, you know, not be restricted by technical concerns with the jumping around, and they can just think about the rhythm as driving rock anthem. Like that kind of thing. Could be cool, but not for this piece. I don't want that kind of energy to take over this piece. It would be something though. I lost the melody. Sorry, what was it? Da, 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 da. Yeah. So, no, that's not what I want here. It's still peaceful and gentle. In a way, the counter melody in the left hand helps with that peaceful, gentle effect because it kind of literally slows the pianist down, right? Because they have to get the thumb around to all of those notes, right? So you're not going to try to play this like really driving and energetic as much. You're going to be more focused on getting this melody in the left hand to sing. See, it's always like I'm talking myself back into revisions that I had previously discarded. As you can see, if you watch these live streams, I do go back and forth quite a bit with my thinking, I guess, on certain issues. Sometimes I want it one way, then I do it another way, then I go back to the original way, then I try a third way, and now I'm toggling. Like, that's just how it goes sometimes. I wish I had a more organized mind or system for figuring out compositional issues. It would be nice if I could be like, you know, methodically like checking off a list of things like, okay, I've tried version A and I decided that it didn't work, so now I can go into version B. And version B doesn't work, so now I have to go on to version C. Can't go back to version A because we already crossed that off. So I have to do, like, it would be nice if it were that, like, if you could be that rigid about it. Maybe some composers can. I don't know. I always find myself doing a revision and going, yeah, this is really cool. And then coming back to it later and going, oh, is this better? Maybe I want the original version. And then sometimes I toggle back and forth. Is that just a sign of an indecisive mind? Maybe. I'd like to think it's part of the creative process, right? Because you tend to see the piece differently at different times, right? You have different perspectives on it, and what are the things that matter to you will change over time. So if you're really concerned with one particular parameter, you're going to make a lot of decisions based on that parameter, like reducing the difficulty. I want to make this piece as playable as possible. So you're going to reduce a lot of the challenges, and in doing so, you'll probably simplify the music a lot. But then if you look at the piece again later and think, I'd really like this piece to be as rich and kind of full of expressiveness as possible, then you might find yourself kind of adding things back in, right? And like, if these two parameters that I just mentioned sound like they're at odds with each other, you have a problem now because you're writing from two different sets of priorities that are sort of not canceling each other out, but they're in opposition to each other. So then you get to like another paradigm shift, I guess, of thinking about how to reconcile those sort of opposing forces, right? Like, I want the piece to be as playable as possible on one hand, and I want the piece to be as rich and expressive and sophisticated as possible on the other hand. And these two things are coming into conflict when I do revisions. Like, they're making me do different things and rewrite the same section multiple times. And then you realize, well, maybe there's a way to reconcile these things so that they're not really in conflict so much anymore. Like, is it possible for this piece to be as rich and expressive and sophisticated as possible, and also as playable and approachable and non-demanding as possible? Can I do both at the same time? Maybe with a little bit of compromise on each side, right? Maybe I limit the technical demands to some extent, and I limit the expressive possibilities to some extent so that I can get kind of a happy medium of both, right? That's one approach. And if you're one of those artists listening to this right now and thinking, well, to hell with that, limitations be damned. I'm just going to do whatever I want all the time, and if you don't like it, then tough cookie. Like, good for you. Seriously. Like, go write your pieces that are, like, unyielding and uncompromising in every possible way. And I don't even mean that sarcastically. We need people to do that too. It's a valuable thing. It is wonderful to see those pieces that are as completely uninhibited and unlimited as the composer was like possibly capable of. Those can be thrilling pieces, right? So, and they're thrilling to write too. I'd like to write some pieces like that sometime. I'd like to give myself permission to say I don't give a damn about length, difficulty, audience expectations, whatever. I'm gonna think like I'm gonna do whatever I want. I'm gonna make this as crazy as I want. I'm gonna make it as simple as I want. I'm gonna make it as whatever I want at any point. I like to think that a composer like Charles Ives was thinking that way. That's how I think that's how we got works like the Concord Sonata. I mean, you look at a piece like the Concord Sonata and you think, yeah, I don't think he was too concerned about this being playable, about this being like a sight-readable piece, like that someone will just like want to play on their recital. Like I don't think he was too preoccupied with restricting himself based on that parameter, and probably a whole bunch of other parameters besides, right? So he doesn't care. He's going to do whatever he wants. I don't see myself as having that luxury in a piece like this with the market that is for and everything. The parameters, the restrictions are there for a reason. They're meaningful. I've thought them through, and these are important things to kind of respect. So the compromise is going to be necessary, right? So if I look at a section like this, I have to really discern carefully, is this difficulty, one, overbearing or over-demanding on a technical level, and two, is it worth it for the end result? Is the expressive result worth it? So if I play the left hand in this counter melody version, I'm really listening, and then I play the simpler version, with just the octave. I don't hate the simpler version. It works. Let me play the counter melody version again. I see where the compromise can come. The left-hand counter melody does not have to be moving notes every quarter note. Like maybe there's just a little snippet of a counter melody. Maybe there's an octave and then the counter melody emerges just for a moment. Like that. I think I don't mind that at all. I'm just gonna do this all in one voice in eighth notes. Here we go. Oops, no, still a G octave. There we go. A little counter melody comes out. Did I want the F natural? So many options here, so many possibilities. I mean, I could go up here, descend like that. Oops. Oh gosh, give me both, please. So it could descend like that. Down to the G. Before I had it going up, or sorry, descend down to the D. Or it could go up to the G. No, so one thing I need to point out as I'm doing this is that a lot of what I'm doing here basically comes down to a part writing exercise. I've decided that I want the left hand to have a counter melody. I don't want it to be note to note, like first species, like quarter note to quarter note, every single note changing. I decided, no, I don't need to do that. I'll just have the counter melody pop out like for a snippet, at the end of the phrase or whatever. Cool. But even so, it's still really a, two-part, part against part, like melodic exercise. This gets back to a fundamental compositional skill. Like when I was a student, as an undergrad and a graduate student, and in the summer composition programs I went to, like EMA, European American Music Alliance, they're really big on this. But even more contemporary ones, like I went to the Atlantic Music Festival, a little more contemporary focus, and there was always through all of my schooling a strong emphasis on learning part writing and mastering it. Either composition teachers lectured about it or you took courses in it. And I took courses in it. I had like sustained courses in part writing at every stage of my compositional educational career. And I always thought, yeah, this is good. This is like you're learning the nuts and bolts of how to, put notes together and stuff. It wasn't until later, like kind of getting out of school and realizing that everything that I do as a composer comes down to some application of the basics. A lot of times it's counterpoint, and it gets all the way back to your cantus firmus part writing exercises, right? Like whatever you're working on, no matter how complex or elaborate the texture is, you can ultimately break it down. If you have multiple parts, you're going to be thinking about, voice against voice, whatever number of voices you have. But you can always break that down to two, right? And look at any coupling of voices. So almost anything you do that has any level of contrapuntal activity, even implied contrapuntal activity, you're going to be thinking about like note to note part writing principles. And the same is true for, formal, like your formal understanding of the piece. Like as a composer, you don't learn the form of music just so you know how to analyze other music. You learn it so that you can write formally convincing music of your own. So anyways, as I'm getting into this section, I realize I'm really trying to figure out a part writing exercise right now. I've got this melody, the given melody, the cantus firmus from the hymn, and I've got a few other parameters in place. I've got a pedal tonic in the bass. I've got some harmony that I'm pretty happy with that I don't really want to change. So this is the harmony with the pedal. So the harmony gets a little hip. And the harmony, by the way, is the interesting restriction on my part writing, because I would like for my two parts to work according with the harmony that I've already chosen, which is not quite common practice. Like that. That's not common practice harmony. But I want to make my part writing work with it. And I think that works. I think it works. Let's just break it down to the two melodies again. Yeah, this last note feels a little weird, but it'll get resolved in the next measure. Nope, it doesn't. Anyways, where was I? I'm okay with it. I like it. Knowing me, I'll probably change my mind later, but I like here. Okay, I'm gonna articulate what I like about it. I like that the left hand starts simple, which gives the right hand a chance to really speak. Oops, let's change this. Change voice to down. Stem voice one. Yeah. It's important that the melody gets prominently featured. Even though this is the last time we're hearing it, it's like we know this melody, and our ears are ready for other things to happen. I still really like the melody to be really, really clearly heard, especially when it's coming after this long transition section. So I like having the left hand be just these simple octaves, which really lets the melody shine out clearly. But then we're ready for the counter melody getting into this second and third bar of the phrase. And then that makes it all the more satisfying when it does come in, because we've given it a little bit of space in which to arrive. And it's still subtle enough that it's not like vying for first place with the hymn tune. The problem that I had before when I had the left hand, whatever I had, was that gives it almost as much importance as the primary melody, which is the hymn tune, which I don't really want to do. I don't want my like random counter melody that I just made up, for this piece. I don't want that to be like featured more prominently than the hymn tune itself, or for it to feel like it's, I don't know, trying to shine out really strongly or something. That kind of defeats the purpose. Like, you don't want the, it's like, we're not here to hear some random counter melody. So that keeps the melody that I consider to be the point, the important thing, that keeps it in focus much more clearly. And then when the counter melody does come in, it's heard as what it should be, which is a counter melody, a secondary melody, an accompaniment. I dig it. I think it's good. And then I'll have the octave come back. Have the octave come back. Let's change all of this to upstem voice 1. Change voice 2, upstem voice 1. This is just to get rid of that unnecessary downstem voice. Right, let's move on. I think here we could actually have the left hand do a counter melody in quarter notes. Yeah, I think that works here, because the main melody at this point is the same note repeated 4 times, right? This A, da, 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 da. So I think that gives us a little more leeway to have the counter melody come out more. But where does it go? I'm not convinced by the right hand harmony here. I don't think that's a strong enough move. I don't hear what that's supposed to be. That's weak. It's getting a little settee-ish. It's starting to sound like a Nocien or something. Or no. A gymnopédé. This is starting to sound like a gymnopédé. Like the second one. Isn't that second gymnopédé? It has some kind of harmony like this. Yeah, this is a settee kind of thing. context, but not really what I'm going for here. See, if I were writing a really uninhibited piece, I would do, something like that. I love those kinds of things. Oh, is that too much? Too much. See, okay, here we go. Yeah. I mean, we could do this all day, I guess. Cool. Still not this piece. Man, I kind of lost the thread here. Measure 80 feels like it's not doing anything interesting. It's kind of spinning its wheels. Stuck here. It feels weird to land. No software update. Go away. Section. I'm not really sure where it's going anymore. Ooh, that's pretty. It's a little funky, but oof. Okay, see, I don't know if it works, but I want it anyway. Wait, what did I do? It was G. There we go. So the melody ascends now. I'm being really fussy with these voices with the shared note head. This is just a way I like to do things. I know some composers don't do this or don't care about it as much. I really like to see the voice clearly articulated with another stem. So, like, if you're one of those people who looks at this and is like, ugh, why does there have to be two voices, right? Because one of them is technically redundant. It's all a unison. So do you really need to see that? This is a convention, it's an idiom, and it's one that I happen to really like, not just because it looks fancy and cool, but like musically you really do get a substantially different result from adding that stem. I know it might seem like a minor detail to some people, but it really clearly shows the voice as a line, as a melody, right? Whereas if you just have it as part of the, undulating texture, like, yeah, technically you still play the notes, but you're not going to bring them out with the same emphasis. So, I gotta say, I actually quite like that. So we only need the B flat once. Come on, select both. There we go. There we go. B flat only one time, and it comes right back down. And we'll go to the F natural now. Yeah, I think it can go all the way down. I think it can just keep on walking down the scale. This will be F natural. And then, yeah, there's kind of a cool progression up to the C major chord now. Like, it feels a little more earned in a way to get to this climactic big chord at measure 83. Well, let me hold on. Let me just get this all written out and then we'll talk about it. Yes. And then here's our upstem voice. No, this should be a downstem voice. Ugh, change voice. I really need to make a key command for changing the voices because I do it so frequently. And Duraco does not have a key command for this by default, so I really need to make my own key command, and I keep meaning to do that, and I keep forgetting because I'm too occupied. See, now it's still upstem voice 1. Oh my god, Duraco. Voices. This is always so tedious to have to be making these changes, so I really need to make a key command for that. Anyways, alright. Here we go. I don't like this. The parallel fourths. See? It's getting back to the part writing stuff I was talking about. I thought, this sounds ugly. Why? Oh, it's because, hello, parallel fourths, right? It's not, no, it doesn't work. One other thing. This is another thing I learned from Mark Hayes. Be flexible in your texture. This is actually, in my mind, one of the marks of a skilled composer. It's so difficult to remember to not be locked into a texture. I don't know if you've noticed this. Anyone who's watching this live stream, like, you might see that oftentimes when I'm trying to figure out a compositional problem, I'm working within some parameter that I've sort of set, like, oh, it's going to be this texture, right, with a repeating G pedal point and this melody and quarter notes, and I'm trying out all of these options without changing that one parameter. But if you're willing to just say, oh, no, I don't need to stick in this texture, like, I can be completely flexible. You know, I can be like Mozart. I can, you know, change the texture at any point. All right, get rid of it. And instead have this. Ta-da! Right? So let's say the melody just goes up to the B. There it is, the downstem voice again. All right. So say the melody just goes up to this B, and that's it. Like, that's where the melody ends. So we had this counter melody that emerged, ended up sticking around for a while because I forgot to not have it. Actually, no, I really needed it here to get to the B flat. But so the counter melody emerges, sticks around for a while, but then it doesn't have to stay as this like thing the whole time. Like, it can actually have an ending point before the primary melody does. That's a satisfying thing. Does it work here? Let's see. So the melody. It does work. We still hear the left-hand counter melody continuing all the way up to this E, which is actually a good thing because I didn't realize this when I wrote it, but this is a canonic imitation. Isn't that neat? I did something clever without even realizing it. That's the best when that happens. That is the absolute best. Because the right hand in the main melody does da 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 da, and the left hand then takes over. Actually, it should go up to the D. Haha, that solves a problem. It should go up to the D, See, look, now that's a really clever little compositional thing right there. And I didn't even mean to do it just to be clever. It just happened. Oh, that's an option too. Whew, that would be really clever. Don't be too clever by half, but here's what we could do. The left hand da da dum, then oh, where'd it go? Oh boy. Look at that. Da, 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 da. We get our counter melody with the canon, and it leads into the C chord. Ah, that's pretty cool. I think that's pretty cool. Now, is it a problem that I don't have the G pedal in measure 82? Can I really just have quarter notes here without the... I mean, think about how much this measure has changed. Before, this measure had this big... right, it was like this whole big thing. And I have significantly stripped down the texture now. It's much fewer notes, and it's less sonorous, but is it as effective or possibly even more effective? Musically, I think it's interesting. I don't know, the more sonorous version might actually be too much, might actually be overwritten. Like, this is what I was talking about. In my quest to solve a technical issue that these chords were too big, too wide of a span, too unwieldy and cumbersome to play, I was trying to solve that issue while keeping the music, interesting and not overly simplified. And in my search for the simpler version, technically, I stumbled upon probably more interesting ideas, more interesting musical ideas, right? With this little canon in the left hand, right? But that it sounds a little weird, but then when I fit it with the harmony, it's like, whoa, that's kind of neat, right? I had this canon, right? Like, I had this canon that now works as part of this, chord progression. Like, that's probably more interesting than what I had before, which was just this, tritone sub-dominant thing. Right, with a big chord. That's hard to play. So, I don't know. I think I'm moving in the right direction. Yeah. Actually, I could do the chord in the right hand. I could just do it in the left hand too, down an octave. That kind of works. I still wish I could have another G in the bass. See, I wish at times a pianist could just have a little third arm. It doesn't have to be a full-size one. It could just be a little miniature arm. It could come out from the armpit or, below the armpit. but an arm on the left side really is where you need it. That would be just long enough, and it only actually needs one finger. Actually, we just need one long finger that can come out from your armpit and play bass notes. I guess that's why the organ exists, maybe, because that's kind of, what the pedal board is on the organ. It's like, hey, guess what? Like, an organist doesn't just have two hands. It's like they have four hands, because two of them are their feet. Anyways, I often think of the organ pedals as like, it's kind of more like you have two really big fingers. You've got 10 fingers here and two really big fingers. That's what your feet are, right? They're two fingers that play like this. Though really good organists, they can play intervals. They can play thirds and stuff with their feet. Like one foot can play two notes at a time, obviously, right? I digress. My joke about the arm coming out is because in a moment like this at measure 82, I so wish that there was a convenient way for pianists to grab a low G. Now, I know that I could write one. Like, don't get me wrong, I could just write, like, I don't know, something like this, where they actually play a low G. Like, yes, technically that is playable. But, oh gosh, is that inconvenient. Even if you make it the G an octave higher, it's really doesn't make it much better. Because that hand has to jump way down, out of the octave, and it's just very treacherous. There's not really a good way to do it here, unless I do something clever with another arpeggio that goes down or something. Like, I don't see it right now, and truthfully, I'm not convinced that there really needs to be another G. We've had this whole big thing of the pedal G. I think the G is enough. Like, yes, I really want to hear this chord with the G in the bass, but like, do we need it? Yes, they can keep the G from the previous measure with the pedal. Even if they don't keep it with the pedal, it's still clearly a type of dominant chord, just on its own. Like, that actually does work on its own. Sometimes I think as a composer you have to have a little bit of courage to write a chord that is not the full chord that you really want. Like, you have to leave a little bit up to implication, right? Like, Verlin Klinkenborg talks about this in his book, Several Short Sentences About Writing. I've mentioned it before. It's a book about writing prose, language, but so much of it is applicable to composing as well, composing music. And one of the things he talks about in that book, again, for writers, writing words, is like, leave space between your sentences, like space for implication, right? Like, he said that, don't think about the distance between sentences as a fixed absolute unit, of the period and the space and the next word. Like, it's not that space, because if you look at it that way, the spaces between sentences are very, very small. But he said, in good writing, spaces between sentences vary. The way the reader perceives the space, right? Some sentences land heavily and with finality, and some sentences invite ambiguity and questions, and then the next sentence doesn't answer those questions, so there's kind of a feeling of tension between the sentences and all of these things, right? I mean, that's how your writing kind of shines and has rhythm and energy, right? It's like the listener perceives the ends and beginnings of sentences differently based on the context of those sentences. I think everyone kind of understands that intuitively, but writers have to understand it explicitly, and they have to understand the technique of achieving that, which is a lot of the work of becoming a good writer, is like, how do you achieve these things that a reader intuitively senses, even if they don't know how to name it. They don't know what the vocabulary is for these things. They don't know how to diagram the sentences, how to talk about tone and style and irony and sincerity and all this stuff. The reader just perceives it, but the writer has to be able to name it and has to be able to execute it, right? And so it's the same with a composer, right? Like, you have to be aware of implied harmony, right? Like, in jazz language, this chord would, I think, be described as a G I know this is crazy to some classical people, but this chord is really a G dominant flat 9 13. So you would write the chord symbol as G flat 9 13. And classical people sometimes find that really crazy because where's the G? There's no G, and you're calling the root of a chord G? You're naming the chord based on a root that's not even in the chord? What? So, some classical people would really insist no, no, no. In proper Roman numeral analysis, this is like in the key of C, you would call this like a 2 diminished 9/8 suspension. It's actually a diminished 2 with a 9/8 suspension. Or whatever. So, yeah, we can go back and forth about the terminology all day long, but to my ears, this is very clearly an implied G dominant chord, because the G here functioning as the pedal, like the pedal point, but also the pedal will probably be held into the previous measure. I'm sorry, into the next measure. I could specify that, maybe I should, but pianists will probably hold this G with the pedal. Even if they don't, the listener's ear will probably still have this G sort of resonating in it. So the listener is almost certainly going to hear this chord at measure 82 as sort of an implied big G dominant chord, even if I don't write that G explicitly in the measure. That's the point I'm trying to make. Do I wish I could have the G for resonance? Truthfully, yes. And again, I could write it if I really think it's that important, like as a grace note. But this is where we get back to that question of, is it worth it? Is the juice worth the squeeze? This asks a lot of a pianist, or at least a lot more than everything previously, right? For them to go grab this G grace note, for some pianists, that will be like a challenge. Like it's a big leap. You got to grab the octave. You got to leap back up. You got to do this all in tempo with the phrase. Like it feels relatively intuitive to me because that's something that like I like to play and I'm used to playing. But I know there are pianists out there who would play it more like this. Right? And it's not because they're bad pianists. It's just because like this is a certain technique that's it can just be a little bit like intimidating or cumbersome for pianists who's not used to doing that kind of stuff. And I do want to keep those people in mind as I write this piece. Like I don't want to turn off a pianist who would otherwise really want to play this piece but go, oh this composer uses uses a lot of like tricky little technique things that I just don't really feel comfortable with, and then they might not play the piece when they would otherwise, right? So again, if you're one of those artists who thinks absolutely no compromise ever, I'm going to be completely unyielding and completely 100% like committed to my craft at any cost, and you're just like disgusted with me from thinking along these practical lines, then I don't know what to tell you. I read Ayn Rand, The Fountainhead. I get it. If you're one of those artists who thinks like you need to be like Howard Rourke in The Fountainhead, people poo-poo on Ayn Rand all the time, but ironically, there is a sort of implied Ayn Rand ideology in a lot of the arts world that people don't talk about. People don't acknowledge this. Like a lot of the arts world subscribes at least to a certain part of Ayn Rand's ideology about, an artist and a visionary being like uncompromisingly true to their vision, right? Like, now, does that come exclusively from Ayn Rand? No. No, it comes from these other people that are okay and approved. Fine. But if you read a book like The Fountainhead and think, oh, this Ayn Rand is just such rubbish, and this Howard Rourke character is just such rubbish, like, well, that's how a lot of artists tend to think about themselves and tend to talk about the role of the artist. Like in my experience in the contemporary landscape that I, experience, it tends to be that artists, again, generally in my experience, tend to shun practical considerations as being kind of like beneath the art, and that it's like you're basically starting to sell out as soon as you start to make those practical considerations, even if you're not actually selling in any literal sense, just by making your art more approachable in any way to the audience, to the performer, whatever, um, that you're already like selling out, or basically akin to doing it. Um, I don't know. I've heard that kind of stuff. You have to you have to square it with your conscience in whatever way you need to. Like, you need to think, am I evaluating myself on that criteria? I mean, that's their criteria. Is that my criteria? What is my criteria for evaluating like a successful artist with integrity? Um, like, is making practical concessions to a performer and to their preferences, is that somehow cheapening my craft? Hmm. No. No, I don't think it is. Like, that's the conclusion that I've come to. I've just thought it through. I mean, I've thought this through more than just now. Obviously, I've thought this through many times in many ways over the years. But like, you think it through. Like, do I feel like I'm not being true to myself if I intentionally limit the piece in this way? If I intentionally limit the technical difficulty of the piece because I want it to be played by a wider audience of people. And what's my motivation for that? Like, is it purely financial? Is it like, well, I want this piece to sell more, so I'm going to write it in a way that I think will sell more copies, so I get more money in my pocket, so I can be a consumer, or whatever. Like, you can interrogate it along those lines and think, if it's a purely financial decision, then maybe I'm cheapening my craft. I'm selling out because otherwise I'd be doing all these other cooler things, and being much more like musically like, you know, uncompromising and have more integrity. Therefore, whatever. Um, if you look at it like, I want people to play this music because I want people to play this music, right? I want my music to be played and to be heard. And if a skilled and talented performer would want to play my music but might be turned off due to its technical difficulty, is it worth accommodating that performer, that like abstract hypothetical performer? Is it worth accommodating them? Yes, absolutely. I want to write music for those people. I'm one of those people. I I appreciate the composers that write music that I can play, right? Because as I've said, like, I am by no stretch a virtuoso pianist with transcendental technique. I'm not. I would say I'm a, a capable, I don't know how to put it exactly. I'm not an intermediate level pianist. I know I'm like into, at the advanced level, let's say, to use the very basic, Alfred kind of way of cataloging it. Um, but I can't play all the repertoire. I just can't. So when I encounter music that is written solidly at my skill level, whether that's repertoire or that's contemporary music, I'm always grateful for it. I love that music so dearly. I mean, truthfully, it's one of the reasons why I love Schubert so much. Why Schubert is one of my favorite composers. Now, I love Rachmaninoff to death. I love Scriabin and Ravel to death. But it's a sore spot for me that I can't play a lot of the pieces that they wrote that I love so much. That's just not a privilege that I'll get to enjoy because I don't think my technique is meant for it. I've tried. I'm 33, so at this point you kind of tend to know if your technique is going to be able to handle it. And I just find I cannot play Gaspard de Noël, right? I cannot play Rachmaninoff's piano concertos, right? As much as I'd love to. I can play the Schubert, well, a lot of Schubert, the Schubert sonatas, the Schubert impromptus. I've played a lot, both sets, and the Momus Musico. And these are great, 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 great pieces. They are also technically relatively limited. That's part of what I love about them. It's like I can play them. The same is true for a composer like Marquez. That's my model for this particular kind of endeavor. Like, Marquez has written some really technically demanding music, but even his really technically demanding pieces are very idiomatic and very well thought out for the instrument. That's not to say other composers aren't, but I mean, like, he's clearly given a lot of thought to having his really advanced music still like be comfortable to play. It does take more work. He does throw in, these like kind of virtuoso, flashy techniques, but they're not like punishing. So like I really appreciate Marquez's music for that reason. That not only is it beautiful, not only is it convincing facsimile or version of all of these various styles. It's also just like comfortable to play. Even when it's difficult, it's comfortable. So I'm like, I want to be that composer for other people. I would love nothing better than for pianists to look at my music the same way that I look at Marquez's music, right? Thinking, oh, I can't wait to see what he's done with this hymn, with this tune. I'm sure it's going to be really cool, and I'm sure it's going to feel good to play, right? If I ever got to experience that as a composer for other pianists, I think that would be a great joy for me. So that's why I keep these limitations in mind and why I really respect them. As much as I'd really like to have all these fireworks of technique flying all over the keyboard, it's like I really want the pianist to feel comfortable too. Now, there might be a solution here, 81. Like, I can do something that's a tiny bit fancy, but not too fancy. This is borderline. This is debatable, but this, yeah, it's still tricky. But that 1/5 down to the low G, this is a way of guiding the pianist's hand down to that octave. Because if you just like, I would argue this is easier to play than if you don't have this note, because they have to just physically pick up their hand and move it across that span of that octave, 5 to 5. But if you give this note with the indication that this is to be, 5 and then 1, that compression of the hand onto the octave and then expanding onto the octave below can actually really help a lot. I mean, that's what, like, etudes do this as an etude. Like, Chopin etudes do exactly this thing in the etude. That's part of what makes Chopin etudes valuable teaching pieces, pedagogical pieces, right? They're not just like brilliant concert works. They are actual etudes that help you learn how to play the piano. If Chopin has an etude where he's having your fifth finger and your first finger come together on the same note and then spread apart, like in the etude, the first etude, it's a little different because it's, the third, but the right hand is doing this like expansion, compression across these octaves. That's actually helping the pianist to learn the muscle memory of those positions, so that if you have to play it just as a like oops, I did it again, something like that, like getting around those octaves in quick succession is easier because your hand has already learned how to make that leap with the crutch or the training wheels of the notes in between. Right? So he is actually preparing you for more advanced things in the future. But if you want to just help sort of hold the pianist's hand a little bit, so to speak, to cover a wide distance really quickly, you can give them that note. And it sounds good too. Right? It's got its own musical effect. But part of what that's doing is just putting some guide rails to get to that low G that otherwise would be like feel like a huge distance. Now, yeah, it gets pretty gnarly here, but I think I dig it. Oops, what did I do? Arp. I'm gonna LV tie here. Cool. The 5 here, that's redundant. But the 1 is important. Yeah, I think we kind of figured out. It took a while, but I think I got the solution to this whole section. I think I solved a lot of problems, and I solved technical problems and got a more interesting musical result at the same time. Which, if you can do that, like, you're doing good. That's what revision's for. Solve multiple problems at the same time. So I'm going to play this last section again and see if it works now. So I'm going to start at 75 firmly. Which, I don't like that. Firmly. That's such an odd word. Firmly. How about, like, I know what I meant, but firmly is such a weird way of putting it. How about with, not with vigor, with determination? Sort of with conviction, with confidence? With determination? With no, confidence is a little cheesy. Stuck again. With boldness? No. It's with conviction. I'm not sure if this is any clearer. With conviction, it's like you're kind of firmly stating the final verse of this hymn. So you're really like asserting it boldly, assertively. I don't know if these things make sense as tempo markings. So I'm trying with conviction. Okay, sure. We'll keep it for now. Oh, mute myself. Did I mute myself yet? No. Okay, mute. Well, yeah, it does have a lot going on. This B flat, it's all of a sudden the harmony of the piece becomes like much more contemporary sounding just for that one beat. I don't like doing that, but then again, it can kind of perk up the listener's ears. Let's keep it for now. I'm gonna play it at the end. I think it works. I'm probably going to be about finished for the night, but this is a good place to leave off. This hymn setting is the one that I've worked on the most. I needed to look at it again to see if it was, like, I don't know, if it needed significant revision. I did do some revision just now. Obviously, I talked about it a lot. Oh boy, this is one of my favorite Dorico nightmares. So if you have a frame break, if you're not familiar with Dorico, a frame break means like you've told the program to start a new page on that measure. So if I did a frame break right here, it would start a new page from that measure. Where is it? So I just insert a frame break, and you see it brings everything over to the new page, which they call frames. Dorico always has a way of calling things differently. Like in my mind, what they call a frame break should really be called a page break. But because they have their way of like, well, it's not really a page, it's frames, because it's frames can exist independently of pages, and you could be putting this frame break in a place where it's not actually one page. It's like, over like 10 pages somewhere else because that's where the frame is. It's like, I get it. I don't tend to use features in the way that the designers like want for you to use them, I guess. Like, they want you to be able to do all this like advanced functionality that I don't particularly ever have a use for. I'm sure there are other users who do, and so they probably do appreciate this language. But for a more basic user like me, who is, really breaking frames because I want page breaks, I always have to do some mental arithmetic to think, wait, frame break, what's the frame? And then I eventually do a complex algebra equation that gets me to that, oh, it's a page break. System break, I understand. System break makes sense because it deals with the systems. I'm surprised they didn't find some other word besides systems so that they could also make this confusing, like line break. You'd be like, wait, line? But there's so many lines in music. What line are they talking about? No, system break makes perfect sense because, it's dealing with systems. But the frame break one always throws me for a loop. So in Dorico, if you delete a manual override frame break, well, you get to see this little eldritch horror. Look at that. It blows my mind that Dorico 6, we're up to 6. They can still let this happen. Of all of the amazing features and functionality that they've added to the program, they couldn't fix the fact that this is what results from deleting one of your manual overrides. Really? I'm sure all the power users in the Dorico forum would say that it's because I'm an idiot and I'm not using the software properly. And actually, it's a feature that if I delete this, it goes like this. And this is really, the program's really just following my instructions perfectly. And, I just need to give it better inputs and blah, 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 like all that kind of stuff. But man, does it blow my mind that if I want to get rid of this frame break, I guess I can either get rid of all of my other manual overrides and see which one was the offending culprit, or I can delete it and then try to sort out this horrific mess that results, which really just means deleting all of the other stuff anyways, because as you can see, when I'm deleting these other manual overrides of system breaks, it's actually just rearranging the eldritch horror. It's not fixing anything. It's not going to fix anything until I get to the last override. Is this the last one? Yeah, let's see. And then, oh, okay, it's because of the first frame break. All right, hold on. So let's go back. Now that I know how it works, I always forget this. I've done this a bunch of times, and I have to figure it out anew each time. So if I get rid of let's just try this. So if I get rid of we get the horror, and then boom, that resets everything. Okay, but what if I get rid of the first one first? So get rid of this frame break, which I'm not even sure why it's there. That does nothing. And then this one. Oh, so for some reason it's the first frame break that's throwing everything off. Why? What is that even there for? Wait for next. Why? I must have put that in there, I guess, but I remember why. Originally, I had a table of contents, and to do a table of contents in Dorico, you have to do a frame break on the first system. It's one of those things. Okay. As I say that out loud, I realize how crazy that sounds. Let me say it again. If you do a table of contents in Dorico where you have a music frame as part of your index, I'm not going to do it right now because it's so tedious to do. But should I try to do it? How do I create a frame again? Oh God, create frame. Oops. Create frame. Create frame. Create text flow. How do I create a music frame again? I'm in engrave mode. I have frame selected. Why is it not letting? Oh, I didn't have the pop-out menu. Goodness gracious. All right, here we go. Insert music frame. So if I wanted this to be part of an index, first you have to select the right one. Of course, so let's just say be that my vision. And then in order to get it the right size, I don't know why they did this, but if you want it to be sized down so that the music is like at a smaller scale so that you can fit it with the text better, you have to do a frame break and then adjust the sizing in the frame break. Like this. I don't get that at all. Like, I don't know why it's like that. And then what it does, of course, is it creates a frame break in the corresponding frame. And then if you delete the one on the corresponding frame, it doesn't delete it in the one that you created. But if you delete this one, right? I don't know. It's just one of those crazy things that I don't understand at all about Duraco. So that was why I had that first frame break on the first system, was because I had created a bunch of frames to use in my table of contents for an index. And I got rid of that because it was getting just too like cumbersome to keep, I don't know, maintaining as I added pieces and stuff. So, all right, we're back to looking at the complete piece. I wanted to get rid of this frame break because I realized I don't like my overrides anymore with the formatting. I think I'm just going to go back to Duraco's default formatting because I made some changes. Whoa. Because I made some changes so my overrides don't make sense anymore. They're based on a previous draft. So the Duraco default. Oh, crud. Maybe that's why I did it in the first place, because I really need this system to go onto the previous page. Oh, crap. Is that why I did all that? Oh, no. That is why. So I have this extra system, and I can't fit it onto page 5, because then this would be way too cramped. The five systems on this page, that's all it's going to fit. If you try to fit this system onto it, it just won't work. And then as you can see, I don't have any space available on the previous 2 pages either. They're all 5 systems as well. So the only way to fix this when this happens is you have to start pushing measures back, and you have to basically make up the space one way or another. So I'm going to go back, reinstate all of the manual overrides to system breaks that I had, because I think I had figured out a fairly optimal system for keeping it. Yeah. See, so that's how I just created a whole nother system, or I should say filled a whole nother system onto pages. It's just by moving measures back successively. So now I'm getting all the way back to that. And look at that. You would never guess that this Duraco originally wanted to be 5 systems and then additional. Well, you could kind of guess it by looking here. This is where the cramp is most evident. And these measures, oh, that's not, actually, that's not good. Yeah, this system is definitely too cramped. So I actually have to go back and do some more overwrites on my system breaks, which is going to get really messy really quick, like that. As soon as I do one, it means I have to. Duraco is kind of weird with this. Like if I really want this measure to go back onto this system, it's not going to let it happen because I already have a manual system break. So I have to get rid of that system break first, which is going to make that happen. It's going to mess a bunch of stuff up. See, we're getting the Eldritch Horror again, and I'm sure, yeah. I was going to say, I'm sure there's some reason why. I hate doing these overrides. This is the most tedious part of composing, is doing all this formatting stuff. So, crap. I don't know if I'm making it better. You know what? I'll save this for, like, tomorrow when I'm fresh, because this is too much jank to deal with right now. The important thing to look at is the piece. How is the piece doing? I think this piece is pretty solid. I think it's pretty much ready to go. I'm going to play it one more time and update my title cards, which I haven't been updating. But playing, oops, let's start here. Playing, Be Thou My Vision again. This is probably how I'll end the live stream. So I'm going to play this one more time and then call it a night. Let's hear Be Thou My Vision all the way through one more time. I do like it. There are still some revisions to do. I do see a few more little issues here and there. I'll probably remember them for next time, but I should try to make a note. So I do need to look at the left hand here. I've missed the 10th both times I've played it. Just now I missed it. So that's usually assigned to me. If I make a mistake on my own piece consistently in the same spot over and over, yes, you can practice it and say, oh, it's just a practice issue. But I believe that that is your mechanism telling you maybe this isn't so good. Like if you struggle to play it, it's not just because you didn't practice it enough. Of course, you can learn almost anything with practice. It's what feels natural, and if it doesn't feel natural to play this, and that's causing you to slip, then maybe you should find something else. So I'm gonna make a comment here. Look at LH. I'll just say look at LH. I'll know what that means. I'll come back to it. I still kind of want the low C here as well. So I'm trying to think if I can get that. So I'll just make a comment. Low C, question mark. That I want to see if I can get the low C. Oh, I just heard a weird distorted sound coming out. Is that, ooh. Oh no, my sound just got all messed up. I don't know if you can hear that on the live stream, but my playing is coming out really, ooh. Well, I'll have to fix that later. That's a technical issue. I'm almost done anyway. So there's something back here. Oh, I'm not sure if I really like this version with the half note. I'm thinking about going back to the old version with 3 notes per measure, with like a quarter note waltz feel. So, oops, comment. Look at LH. Bring back quarter notes. See older versions. Okay, that's about it for this piece. For next time, I'd like to show some of my other pieces because I'm looking at this whole set again. I'll probably say more about this in a future live stream if I keep working on these pieces in the live stream, but these pieces are very important to me, and you know, I've worked very hard on them for a long time, and I do believe that I will have them published someday. It's been a goal of mine for a long time to get these pieces published. I've had some, I guess maybe interest from publishers in these pieces, but that still has not yet solidified into, you know, an actual publication. So, so that's just something I have to, I don't know, not live with, but it's something I have to keep working on, I suppose. And I figure, well, maybe the pieces just need more work. And I can, you know, sort of try again with the publishers, and I don't know. But I'm not going to give up on them, and something will happen with these pieces someday. I'll figure out something. So I've got a bunch of them, and I'm just going to be going back into the set, seeing what I can do. I think they're pretty substantially solid and complete. You know, as I scroll through, I can see these pieces are, you know, finished. Like they, you know, they're not sketchy. They don't have big chunks missing or anything like that. Like I think I finished all of these pieces. So maybe it's a matter of doing more revision and kind of tightening things up a little more. I don't know. We will see. I'm gonna just get back into these pieces and see what I can figure out with them. So my sound seems okay now. what was happening before. I was hearing horrible distortion from my computer when I was playing. But maybe I'll play one more piece just for fun before I sign off. I've done enough talking. And I think I'm going to play this one. And the reason why is this is one of the more recent ones that I've written. Some of the other ones, as I'm scrolling through, like you can see, well, let's like go back all the way to this first one, The Solid Rock. No, sorry, Be That My Vision. I don't even remember when I started this piece. It was like years and years ago. Years and years ago. I think I started this piece about when I started my job as a church musician. In 2000, maybe 2020. So the germs of this piece very well could be 5 years old, solidly. And that's for a 3-page piece. So imagine living with something like that for that long. Yeah. Anyways, this piece, which one? Where was it? This one. I Need the Every Hour. This one I wrote much more recently. I think this was the last one I wrote before I stopped like really working on these pieces. And I think I only wrote this like a couple months ago. And I think I wrote it pretty quickly. So truthfully, I'm looking at it right now and I don't even remember like writing it. Like I don't remember when I wrote this. Like I knew it was a couple months ago, but I don't remember writing this piece. But as a composer, you get that with a lot of your pieces. You know, if you are writing all the time, which I am, you know, you don't remember. I mean, it's like, do you remember every meal you've eaten? You know, like think about it. Can you remember eating breakfast 3 years ago on, you know, like January 3rd? I don't know, like. So that's how it feels with your composition sometimes. It's like if you can write a piece. Sometimes I can write a piece in a day. That's basically if I take the whole day to write a piece. But more often with my work schedule, like, and I'm writing quickly, I can easily write a piece in 3 or 4 days. And I have written many pieces over a span of 3 or 4 days. So, like, you can't remember every 3 or 4 days in your own past. You know what I mean? If you're watching this, you're thinking about this. So, like, I don't know why it would be different with your compositions. You remember the composition, obviously, right? You look at the piece, but I don't remember writing this piece. Anyway, so I'm gonna play it right now because I just want to hear it. I'm curious about it. So yeah, here it is. I Need the Every Hour. there's a lot to do with this piece. It does need work. A lot of technical issues, some really uncomfortable, awkward things. I don't know how I didn't see that before. I guess I was too busy writing it, but revise right hand all throughout this section. The right hand in this section is really awkward. And the left hand's a little awkward too. Oh well. Yeah, I'll figure it out. I'll get back into this piece and do a thorough revision on it. But I do like it. I like it. I do remember now, some of it's coming back to me, and I remember one of the things I was stressed out about with this piece is that I was thinking it was getting to be too long. I was thinking, oh no, it's kind of starting to feel a little over long. I think it's probably the right length. I think I need to introduce a little more variation and embellishment on some sections, like especially this last section. It could probably have a little more just sort of subtle touches to kind of set it apart. A lot of subtle, like little polishing touches would probably really help this piece tighten up. You know, a lot of what separates great pieces from just like sort of okay pieces is actually the subtle things. It's the little things. The little things, when compounded over like many instances, are actually profoundly powerful. You know, if you do a little thing right, and that little thing occurs like dozens of times throughout a piece, like that makes an incredibly powerful difference for how the piece sounds and how it feels and all that. So you got to look for those little things, and then you got to, get them right. So I'm seeing all these little things that I want to start polishing up in the piece, but I think it'll get there. And yeah, oh my gosh, there's so many of these pieces. Oh boy. Well, I think I've got a new project, or not really a new project, but I think I'm going to be working on this thing again. Oh gosh, how do I get rid of this frame? That I didn't want. There we go. All right, well, thanks for watching. If you're watching this, if you watched all the way to the end, you surely deserve some kind of prize or medal. So with that, I will say good night, YouTube. See you next time.